Welcome into Shooting the Breeze. I'm Samir Kumar, joined with my fellow co-host Tim Mohawk. And this is the third show in the row that we have a special guest on today. We are joined with News 12 The Bronx and Brooklyn sports director Pat O'Keefe, who was gracious enough to offer me an internship at their station 2 years ago. And from there I learned a lot, whether it be producing, writing, and stand-up reporting. And also my mock sportscast, they're always there to, offer constructive criticism or things I can do better, things I've done great at. And, it was a great foundation. Pat, thanks for joining us today, man.
Samir, it was a pleasure to have you as an intern, and it's a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast today. Both of you guys, thanks for having me.
Of course, Pat. Likewise, pretty much. And, Tim, you have any thoughts before we get going?
No, Samir, you're doing a great job here booking our guests for us, and one after the other, we've had really quality conversations, so I'm just excited to get to talking here with Pat and have another one of our solid episodes here to get out to the world.
Absolutely. Pat can also tell the story real quick before we get into things of how I sat next to Didi Gregorius and A-Rod my second to last week at the internship, and then A-Rod's retirement was my last day of the internship.
Is that right? That was your last day of the internship when A-Rod retired, when he announced his retirement?
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's right.
It was the last game.
His final game that Friday. That's right. And before the game, there was a press conference, obviously, and he was up on the podium, and you were kind of standing off to the side, and some of his teammates had filtered into the press conference, and I was sitting in the chairs in the middle, and I look off to the left, and you're standing there, and Didi Gregorius just took a seat right next to you. I was laughing. That was very funny. It was very natural there too. Didi did.
No, I blended right in with those ball players, man. I'm a shortstop in the hole waiting for the Yankees. If Didi ever goes out with an injury, call up Samir Kumar. I can bet 300. I can give you 50 home runs and 130 RBIs. Just don't sleep on my talent.
Well, it's funny you say that because looking at the two of you against the wall like you were, I couldn't tell who was who at the time.
Well, we're secretly brothers that you just don't know about, man.
There you go.
But on the other side of the Yankees, man, it's been a rough go for Luis Severino this past month, man. He just doesn't look like the same ace-quality pitcher that we're used to seeing. Any thoughts, Pat? Anything that you see that's kind of been wrong with him?
Yeah, it's gone from, one or two bad starts, maybe he's a little tired, to, okay, maybe he's starting to break out of it, and you're starting to look for some positive signs. But now it's definitely something to be worried about. It's been 7 starts. It's been a severe decline the last 7 starts compared to what he did before the All-Star break. And it is definitely concerning because you can talk all you want about the lineup, and obviously Judge is out and Sanchez is out, and those are big holes. And Gregorius provides a lot of power, and Stanton provides a lot of power. Severino's the most important guy on this team. And all this talk about once you get into the playoffs, you're going to be fine, just get there and see what happens. That all kind of goes out the window if Severino doesn't pitch like the guy he was the first half of the season. So this is definitely a concern right now. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if he's tired. But there's something going on, and it is a big concern for the Yankees right now.
I don't think it has to do with him being tired because he's still getting 97 miles per hour on that fastball, clocking in at the highest at 99 miles per hour. I think more so might be just tipping his pitches, or a lot of it just might be his struggle with location, and a lot of it could be mentally.
One of the things I noticed last night watching him pretty closely, he's having trouble putting guys away. A bunch of times he's getting to 0-2, he's getting to 1-2, and look, he's facing the Mets, so for the most part he's facing inferior hitters, and they were fouling these pitches off, and they were pushing his pitch count up, and he was having a hard time putting batters away, whereas earlier in the season, those were strikeouts, and that's very concerning.
Now, Pat, you're right there at the heart of it, but for the Yankees, obviously, you're breezing through the first half of the season. You come out of the All-Star break in decent shape in the standings, still chasing Boston, but then, that eventful series comes, we're coming up on 2 weeks ago now, where they just get absolutely destroyed by Boston in every way imaginable. And to the Yankees' credit, they've bounced back. They've won 6 of 8 against largely, like you said, inferior teams. But what do you get the kind of feel around New York is right now? Because we all know Yankee fans, and we all know that things are, if they're not great, things are terrible. There's not really a middle ground, even though this team is 30 games over 500. But what's the general feel around the Bronx right now as far as just, I won't say, panic feelings or things coming back down to earth, but basically, what's the general feel just with not only the fans, but just the way that the media is kind of interacting with the team as things are kind of, again, I don't want to say going back down to earth, but are kind of normalizing after that Red Sox series?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. We're taping this about 5 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, right? If you had asked me that question 24 hours ago, 5 o'clock on Monday, I would say the Yankees have done what they needed to do ever since the Red Sox series was over. Beat inferior teams. And look, if you look at the schedules, that's how Boston got to 50 games above 500. They had a much softer schedule the first half of the year than the Yankees. So now you figure it's the Yankees' turn playing teams like the White Sox or the Mets, the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Tigers, all these teams they have coming up in this stretch, the Texas Rangers. The Yankees were taking care of business. They had won 6 out of 7. Yesterday, around 5 o'clock, they put CC Sabathia on the disabled list, and then Luis Severino goes out and takes a huge step backwards in his performance. So in the course of one night yesterday, 40% of their rotation is now a huge question mark. And before the game, their rotation was tenuous at best. Now it's, they're comfortably in front of Oakland. Though Oakland still is playing very well. They're still probably going to take care of business against the teams on their schedule coming up, the Rays and the Blue Jays and the Orioles and the Tigers and those teams they have leading into Labor Day. But there are much bigger concerns now because you're down Sabathia, who is pitching well again, and you're really unsure of what you can get from your ace or the guy who's supposed to be your ace in Severino.
Now, it's funny that you mentioned Oakland, and that's obviously the team that the Yankees are battling for that final wild card spot. But there's also Seattle in that picture. Now, when I was on my drive over to Tim's house today, I put on Francesa. Who else but Francesa? He was on with Mark DeRosa, and Francesa actually had a good question. He said, if you were the Yankees, would you prefer to face Oakland because their lineup is just clicking on all cylinders, or would you prefer to face Seattle, but they have James Paxton on the mound? Who would you honestly prefer, Pat?
It's a good question. I would probably prefer to face Seattle. James Paxton's a good pitcher. He's had a very good season, but he doesn't scare me. He's not Chris Sale. He's not Jacob deGrom. He's not Luis Severino from the first half of the season. He's a good pitcher. Oakland, there's something going on with Oakland. And Oakland doesn't win with the big names, and they don't win with the stars. They never have, but they always seem to be in the mix. And this Oakland team is starting to remind me of the teams from the early 2000s, the consistent playoff teams that just knew how to play together, and they knew how to win. So right now it's the Oakland team that scares me more than the Seattle team. Although I will say this, actually, well, you know what? I was going to make an astute point, but it's a meaningless point. I was going to make the point that Robinson Cano would scare the bejesus out of me in a one-game playoff, but as I was saying it, I realized that Cano would be ineligible to play in that game anyway because of the PED suspension. I
honestly don't think he should have gotten suspended for the playoff game. I think the suspension that he got was good enough, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, they put that in about 5 years ago. They just thought it was a bad look. Guys suspended for such a severe rules-breaking violation and getting such a severe punishment, and then all of a sudden they're helping their team win the World Series. I just think baseball thought that was a bad look, and they really haven't gotten much pushback off of that. Most people seem to be in agreement that if I'm talking players and executives alike, I haven't heard a lot of pushback on either side that says that 80 games is enough. People seem to be in agreement that if you get busted with PEDs, you can't play in that year's playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the rules are the rules. I guess if it's universally agreed on by members of baseball that I'm not a part of, then I guess there's nothing I can do about that. But moving on from that, we're on the topic of pitching while we're here. Do you think Lance Lynn and Jay Happ is enough cause for optimism, assuming that Severino still can't come back and be the ace that he's supposed to be, and Sabathia just doesn't quite rediscover the CC Sabathia of old down the stretch?
Oh, I mean, no, I don't. I mean, they've done a nice job. They've done a very nice job. I mean, I think Lynn's given up 1 run in his 3 appearances. Happ has pitched to a 3 ERA in his 2 starts. They've done very well for exactly what the Yankees need them to be. Their 4th and 5th starters in the rotation. If you all of a sudden are starting to count on these guys to be your 2nd and 3rd starters, then I think you run into a world of trouble. There's a reason why those guys have never been 2nd and 3rd starters for a championship caliber team in their career. So, big picture, if the Yankees are going to do anything this playoff series, I think they need to be very careful to rely too heavily upon J-Happ and Lance Lynn.
Pat, one non-playoff related question with the Yankees here, it brings me back to the forefront of my mind because I saw yesterday they did some poll on MLB.com for Rookie of the Year, and right now Gleyber Torres is still ahead of Miguel Andujar in the AL voting in that poll. I mean, I don't know how official that is, but at the end of the day, with Gleyber kind of going through the second half slump and Miguel Andujar kind of being one of the people pacing the Yankees lineup right now, is there any argument that if things, obviously will regress to the mean a little bit here probably down the stretch, but is there really any argument that Miguel Andujar isn't the best rookie on the Yankees right now?
Well, first of all, how cool is it that the 2 frontrunners in the American League Rookie of the Year race seem to be Yankees? Because you don't associate the Yankees with having a strong crop of rookies. They usually have high-priced veterans and guys that have several years of experience. So the fact that they have not 1 but 2, and probably the 2 leading candidates, is fascinating to me. I think their last Rookie of the Year was probably Jeter in 1996. Matsui should have won in 2003, but that was a different case anyway because he wasn't a young rookie from the minors. But to answer your question, I think Andujar is the Rookie of the Year right now. Torres has been bad since the All-Star break. Well, since he got hurt on July 4th, and he's been bad since then. He has not hit well. He's actually not fielded well either. Andujar's probably been the team's best hitter the last 2 weeks, along with Stanton. It's Andujar and Stanton carrying the offense right now, and Andujar's been getting big hits for this team. Now, the problem with Andujar, he's made some really costly errors in the field. He's had a couple of 2-error games. I think that's overshadowed what he's done at the plate. But I also think when it comes time to vote at the end of the year, I don't think the voters are going to look too long and hard at their defense. They're probably going to be comparing Andujar's offensive production to Gleyber Torres's. And if you compare that right now, I think you definitely have to give the edge to Andujar.
Absolutely. I think Andujar is just outperforming Gleyber Torres at this certain point of the year. Gleyber Torres has just hit a tailspin. He's just not looking like the same player that we saw him be ever since he got called up from April. But having said that, Andujar right now looks like the AL Rookie of the Year. Who do you see having the most bright career at this point?
I still say Torres. Nothing I've seen from Torres in the last month. I made a comment to somebody, and maybe I jumped the gun a little, because Torres basically came up and he never went into a slump. But I told somebody that this guy's better than Jeter at the time. For what he is in his career at 21 years old, the way he was playing in the first half of the season, he was playing better than Jeter was when he was a rookie, also at 21 years old. And that was just going by the numbers. I mean, he carried himself similarly to Jeter. Unflappable, made strong plays in the field, got big hits. He had all the Jeter qualities, and his numbers were actually better than Jeter's numbers the first half of the rookie seasons. I still say, if you're talking long-term, who's going to have a better career? And I wouldn't rule Gleyber Torres out of the Rookie of the Year. He could have a monster September. He could have a ton of big hits, and he could, in my mind, move past Andujar again. So I'd still say, if I'm buying one of these 2 guys for the rest of their career, I'm still buying Gleyber Torres.
I don't really disagree with anything you said there. I think right now Torres is just hitting a slump. He'll get over it, and Andujar is just the hotter player right now, and he's had bigger moments for the Yankees this season than... Torres has had some big moments too, but right now Andujar is just looking like the better player. But
The thing you like about both of these guys, Samir, is that they both get big hits. They're not just putting up numbers. They've gotten, early in the season, Torres got a ton of big hits late in close games, and lately it's been Andujar doing that for the Yankees, and that's what you really like from these two rookies.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was at that Houston game earlier this year when Miguel Andujar had that 2-out double in the 10th inning, and then Torres just drove him in. From that moment there, I just knew that these two kids were just special, even though they're my age.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's funny how I called them kids. I was like, even though they're my age.
Well, they're kids to me.
Well, to you, maybe. I mean, I don't think you're very old, so if anything, you're like old enough to, I guess, be an older brother.
I would say I think this may be the first time in my life, or last year or this year, that I am older than everybody on the Yankees. And I'm about a year or two away from being older than everybody in Major League Baseball.
Wow. Well,
I think I'm about 6 months older than Sabathia. So
You got Bartolo out there.
There's not many major leaguers older than me at 39 years old right now.
Bartolo might go to 55.
That's true. He might hang on for 300 wins.
I think he honestly will. I mean, he's still pitching very effectively. I don't see why he shouldn't just continue on if he can get like Vince Carter. Honestly, I know I'm going to bring that up, but both players are going strong. I don't see why they can't keep going.
That's a good comparison because they're both in their prime. They were both explosive. Vince Carter was as explosive as anybody, and Bartolo was just a power pitcher. He'd get out there and he'd blow you away. And obviously, over time, Carter's explosiveness has gone away, and Bartolo is no longer a power pitcher. So they had to find ways of beating you differently, and they've both excelled at that. And they've really found nice niches and nice roles in their respective sports, and they've both turned into great clubhouse guys, which in the case of Vince Carter was not always the case in my opinion, Samir, but now he's an elder statesman and he seems to be a leader on every team and every locker room that he's in.
Yeah, Pat, that was Toronto. They were such a dysfunctional organization. Heck, if I was in that locker room, man, I would have been a head case myself.
You got Vince Carter's back, I understand.
Nah. He's my guy. He's what got me into basketball, so I can't, I mean, I'm sure he did something wrong that, I'm not seeing, or maybe I do see, but I'm just not going to admit it.
That's okay.
Anyway, Pat, you know how big of a basketball fan I am, how big of an NBA fan, and everything that goes with that. Did you see yesterday on Twitter Spencer Dinwiddie's comments?
I did. Spencer Dinwiddie and his cancer going back and forth a little bit with this.
Now, do those comments to you reignite the rivalry between the two teams, especially because both these teams are going to be positioning for marquee free agents next offseason?
They are. I mean, does it reignite the rivalry? I wish it did. Anything to make this rivalry a little bit more exciting. The problem with this rivalry is that the Knicks and the Nets are in the same division right now with, in my opinion, the three best teams in the Eastern Conference now that Kawhi Leonard is here. I mean, I know a lot of people are handing the conference to Boston. I'm not so quick to put Boston ahead of Toronto, but in my mind, if Kawhi is healthy, it's Boston, Toronto, or Toronto, Boston, and Philadelphia is definitely number 3. So now you look at the other two teams in the Atlantic Division, the Knicks and the Nets. What is the rivalry over? What are they, what are they competing for? 4th place? A 6th seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs? Now, next year, when there's really something on the line, like you mentioned, free agency, I think the Nets should have enough room for 2 max free agents. The Knicks should have enough cap room for 1 max free agent. But there's a lot of other teams you're going to throw in the mix there as well. So it's not going to be just the Knicks against the Nets. And let me just say it this way, and I know you're a diehard Nets fan, Samir.
Yep.
If the Knicks and the Nets are going after the same free agent, it's not really a fair fight. I know that the Knicks have had a lot of dysfunction through their years, but it's still Manhattan, Madison Square Garden, the New York Knicks, the city's team, against the team from the outer borough. I don't think the Nets can put up much of a fight, all other things being equal, against the Knicks in free agency. But we'll wait to see next summer.
To kind of counter what you just said, though.
Go ahead.
Yep. Jay Williams came out there. Yep, I said it. Jay Williams, the former Duke standout who ended his NBA career on a motorcycle. That Jay Williams said that Kevin Durant is going to end up in New York next year, and Jimmy Butler and Kyrie Irving. Kyrie grew up a Nets fan, grew up a big Jason Kidd fan, grew up in New Jersey, so that's what I guess maybe sentimentality.
Well, that's what they would be. All right, so let's just say that happens. Let's say that happens. So who goes to of those three? The Knicks have room for one. The Nets have room for two. Who goes to the Knicks?
I say Kevin Durant goes to the Knicks.
Exactly.
Kyrie and Jimmy Butler go to the Nets. I'll take Kyrie and Jimmy.
Yeah, but let's look at the whole team now. Now you're putting Durant in with KP and Kevin Knox and a developing Frank Ntilikina. That team doesn't look that bad. The Nets would look if that happens, that scenario, where do I sign for that? That would be amazing. If those three guys came to the city of New York in the same offseason, then the rivalry would be probably better than it's ever been, because there's never really been a rivalry. Very rarely have they both been good at the same time. The last time the Knicks made the playoffs was 2013, and the Nets also made the playoffs that year. That was the first year of Barkley Center, when the Nets lost that disappointing first-round series to the Bulls.
Don't mind me.
And the Knicks lost the disappointing second-round series to the Pacers. But other than that year, they really haven't ever been good at the same time. I mean, the Knicks' heyday of the 90s, the Nets were usually out of the playoffs. And then when the Nets became the top team in the Eastern Conference in the early part of the 21st century, the Knicks started their decline. So we never really got to enjoy that rivalry.
Jason Kidd did sweep the Knicks, though, in 2004 or 2003?
2004, I think.
Yes.
When the Knicks had Marbury, right?
Yep, first year of Marbury. The Nets did sweep the Knicks, so we had that.
There was no juice. There was no drama. That wasn't a rivalry.
No, I know.
The Nets were going to win that series.
No, I just
the drama was, will the Knicks get a game? And they didn't.
But honestly, speaking with Spencer Dinwiddie's comments, I think it'll lead to a scuffle during the first game of the year, especially because the Nets host the Knicks on their first night at the Barclays Center this upcoming season.
Yeah, absolutely. Friday night.
Home opener. Yep. That'll probably lead to some sort of scuffle between two guys. Maybe Dinwiddie and Cantor themselves go at it.
I mean, it doesn't take much to get Cantor involved in a scuffle, though, does it?
I just love how LeBron...
You probably want to fight one of the three of us based on something we say in this podcast.
I just love how LeBron just completely trolled the Knicks last year. He said King of New York, still in center court. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a fun. I was at that game. That was a fun night at the Garden. The Knicks were up by about 22 points in the second and third quarter. The place was rocking. Ntilikina stepped up to LeBron. Cantor got in his face, and then fourth quarter, LeBron took over the game, started driving the lane, kicking out to Kyle Korver, and we've seen it happen many times before. LeBron taking over down the stretch in the Garden, and it ended up in another heartbreaking Knicks loss. But that was a fun night overall.
It was a very interesting point. It was a very interesting finish to that game, but I think, honestly, Dinwiddie's comments will lead to some sort of scuffle, maybe. And then, if the Knicks and Nets do land these marquee free agents next offseason, and Dinwiddie and Cantor are still on their respective teams, then I can kind of see things escalating further into a real rivalry.
Well, the problem here, and here's the problem. Let's just say the scenario you pointed out, which probably isn't going to happen. Butler and Irving go to Brooklyn, and Durant goes to New York. But let's say, hypothetically, that happens. If that happens, then Cantor's definitely not on the Knicks, and Dinwiddie's probably not on the Nets either.
So, yeah, that's another way I kind of look at it. I think it's just kind of off-season. The NBA just needs some off-season drama to get people excited, keep people talking about it, and then it might lead to a scuffle or two. That's pretty much the bottom line.
Well, anything to add some juice to the rivalry.
Now, Pat, talking about the Knicks, talking about a former Knick, Carmelo Anthony, is heading to Houston. And on Monday he's today I believe he signed a deal for a couple million with his wild offseason of travels. But at the end of the day, I've talked to a lot of Knicks fans that I know about Melo and his legacy with the Knicks and all that, which it can be debated as they tend to debate amongst themselves with, but. As far as Houston goes, you already have a video clip circulating the internet where some reporter asks him on the street, is he going to play off the bench with Houston, and he's already saying, let's let it play out. He's not buying into what a lot of people are saying is that he'll be a man off the bench into 18-19. What do you think about his fit there with obviously some guys that like James Harden, who obviously is going to be a major driver of offense as he always is, and Chris Paul being a superstar himself at the point? Do you think there's a solid fit there, or is there some cause for potential drama down the road?
I think there's cause for potential drama. I think it's a good sign that Carmelo Anthony said, let's let it play out. That's kind of the first time he's echoed those comments about his role on the team, whether it be Oklahoma City or now Houston. Last year, anytime he was asked a similar question, the answer immediately was, no, I'm not coming off the bench. I'm a starter. The fact that he's saying, let's let it play out, shows that he's kind of starting to come around to the idea that this could be the best fit for him and his team. And it is. I don't think there's any question that it's the best fit for him and his team for a number of reasons. Number one is the most obvious. With Melo and with Paul and with Harden on the floor together, there's not enough basketballs to go around. Number two, Carmelo Anthony can be the number one scoring option when Harden goes to the bench. Chris Paul's never been a number one scoring option. He can be, but that's not necessarily his role. So when Harden's on the bench, Carmelo can come in and be that role that he's always filled in his career, which is the number one scoring option. And number three, by coming off the bench, that means you're playing against the other team's bench players as well. And I think anybody who watched Carmelo play last year saw that he's lost a step, and he's not as dynamic a scorer as he was throughout his career. And he was one of the best scorers in NBA history. He's going to go down as such. But he lost a step last year, and he's not as dynamic a scorer as he was. But that was Carmelo, for the most part, playing against starters on other teams. Now, the guys on the other teams are second strings for a reason. They're just not as good as the starters. So if you give Carmelo a chance to play against the second stringers, I think that's going to increase his production and make it a lot easier for him to score. So for all of those reasons, I think it's an obvious fit that Carmelo comes off the bench, and he can be, if he approaches this the right way, he can be a weapon for the Rockets that they didn't even have last year when they nearly went to the NBA Finals.
I pretty much agree with everything you said there, Pat. I don't think Carmelo Anthony is nearly the same player that he once was, and coming off the bench will serve him well because he still has that ego that he wants to be the top scorer out there. He wants to have the ball in his hands. He wants to put in buckets left and right. He wants to be that guy. He's not willing to defer to a James Harden or any other type of, or Russell Westbrook last year. He doesn't want to have to defer to another top scoring option because he wants to be the guy putting the ball in the basket. But now I think he kind of came around to realize that he's the guy now that he's not Carmelo Anthony anymore. He's not a superstar player anymore, but he's in his mindset, he just doesn't want to defer at the same time. So I think he came to terms that Houston is the best bet for him to win a championship. He can come off the bench. He can outscore the opponent's bench and still be Carmelo Anthony in his mind, but I guess on a lesser scale, if that makes any sense.
But you know what? What he needs to realize also, he's always concerned about his legacy, but he's only looking at this from the point of view as the legacy of a dominant scorer, which he was, which he no longer is. But when he's looking at his legacy, what he needs to realize is people will think very highly of him and will do a lot for his legacy if he embraces this new role late in his career, like so many other Hall of Fame level players have. Bill Walton is a perfect example when he embraced the six-man role with the Celtics in 1986. To a lesser degree, your guy, Vince Carter. The narrative on Carter was not great when he was in the prime of his career because of how he left Toronto and he went to New Jersey and put up big numbers, but he never won. And I think Carter got a lot of blame for those things. But now that Carter's kind of the elder statesman, he's kind of rewritten the narrative about his career because he's accepted a role and he's fit that role very well. That's something that Carmelo... Now look, Carmelo is like 7 years younger than Vince Carter, so Carmelo should have a bigger role in the Rockets than Vince. But my point is, an athlete, a formerly great athlete, realizing his limitations, accepting the lesser role for the good of the team does a lot for your legacy.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are going to remember Vince Carter's buzzer beater against the San Antonio Spurs in that 2014 playoff series. I don't think that's going to go away from the minds of many people. Thank God I was watching that game, because if I missed it and everybody was telling me about it, I wouldn't have heard the end of it.
Thank God you saw it.
Yes, thank God I saw it. But, I mean, I think Carmelo Anthony is due for that kind of playoff moment as well. Maybe he gets the ball in the corner. He's getting double, triple teamed, but being Carmelo Anthony.
That's a good point. But here's the thing. He's not going to get double or triple teamed. Why? You know why? Because James Harden's going to be getting double or triple teamed.
Good point as well.
So Carmelo's going to be more wide open than he's been his entire career. He was always the guy getting double or triple teamed in Denver and in New York. Now he's not going to be that guy in Houston.
Yeah, but, I think he's honestly due for that big playoff moment, and maybe that'll kind of rewrite the narrative of his career. Instead of him being Hoodie Melo, or the guy that doesn't want to sacrifice his ego for the betterment of the team, maybe Chris Paul's there too, the whole banana boat. Chris Paul will be there to kind of keep him in line, to keep him to play within the means of the team instead of him just going out there and chucking up shots.
I agree with that. I think that's a factor, because Chris Paul is a dominant personality in this league, maybe the most dominant. And I would agree with what you said there. I think he's a factor in this.
We're talking with Pat O'Keefe of News 12. And Pat, I don't want to eat up all of your evening here, but do you have time for a couple quick NFL questions, Giants-Jets related?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Samir and I, we were at the Giants-Browns preseason opener.
Oh, so after that Saquon Barkley run, I wanted to go home because there was nothing exciting about that game.
It's preseason week one. Take from it what you will. But obviously, like Samir said, Saquon, big run that first play of the game, and after there, kind of starters get out, and that's about it for that first week. But my question with the Giants is the backup quarterback position obviously was a hot button at the end of last year that ended basically Ben McAdoo's coaching career, taking Eli out for whatever reason. He thought that was a good idea. But with now Davis Webb in the proverbial number 2 spot, at least right now, he was horrendous. And I try not to jump and have knee-jerk reactions to any preseason games, especially that early, but watching him on that night, it was pretty evident that guy probably did belong behind Geno Smith last year. And I know they have Kyle Lauletta waiting in the wings, and it's all a moot point if Eli stays healthy like he has through his whole career. But should the Giants be legitimately concerned, and should they be potentially looking at dumping maybe a guy like Davis Webb and looking for another quarterback, amongst the cuts or even with a trade before the regular season gets going?
I think it's too early for concern. One preseason game, the guy probably, his excitement level was at an all-time high after barely stepping onto the field last year. This is the first time he's ever gone through camp as number 2 on the depth chart, so now that's a different mindset. He knows he's one bad hit away from being the guy on this team, and I think anyway, those things contributed to his performance on Thursday. Now, after Friday's game against Detroit, if you see much of the same thing and we're halfway through the preseason and you don't have a lot of confidence in this guy based on what you've seen, then I think you start to get concerned. But right now, after one preseason game, this guy playing for the first time in basically a year, I think it's a little too early for concern.
Fair enough. And then on the flip side, sticking with the quarterback position for the Jets, again, obviously one preseason game does not mean, it doesn't bear out necessarily what's going to happen, but they're obviously feeling pretty good about watching their number 1 pick, Sam Darnold, go to work and perform pretty well there last week, as well as Teddy Bridgewater coming in and really looking good after, he's been rehabbing his knee for the last 2 years. Do you think, similarly, is there a move to be made there? There's some, building buzz on the Twitter world, and maybe some of the NFL insiders like Jason La Canfora has suggested there's a potential to maybe move one of those quarterbacks. I mean, McCown's been a guy who was really, really strong for them last year. Looks like a mentor for a guy like Darnold. And then Bridgewater, who's still young and obviously had a high pedigree coming into the NFL before those injuries, would be an attractive trade piece, but also someone that the Jets might want to hang on to. Is there maybe a move to be made there? Not necessarily to the Giants, as I kind of suggested, but maybe to another team that's having QB issues or has an injury pop up. Do you think the Jets could maybe pull a piece, maybe a draft pick or some nice depth piece in order to clear up the depth chart just a little bit to maybe divide those reps a little bit cleaner?
I think there is a move to be made with the Jets. I don't think they need to rush anything. I think if you had to draw the perfect quarterback scenario for the Jets after their first preseason game, and again, it's one preseason game,
right.
But the perfect scenario obviously would be all three quarterbacks play well, and really two quarterbacks, because you already know what Josh McCown is, and you don't need to see much from him. But you need to see something from Darnold, and you need to see something from Bridgewater, and I thought you saw great signs from both of them. The one that's going to be moved is Bridgewater. There's not much of a market for McCown. Obviously, you're not moving Sam Darnold, but there's no rush to trade Teddy Bridgewater. There will come a time, I'm almost positive, there will come a time during this NFL season where you have a team that is kind of ready-made or feels that it's ready-made to make a run at a Super Bowl. Great defense, running game, big play wide receivers, the whole thing. Except they'll be lacking at quarterback for two reasons. One, the guy who they had in place really isn't getting the job done. Or, number two, they've had a catastrophic injury and they need somebody to fill that hole. One of those two scenarios is most likely going to present itself. I think the Jets are wise to wait until that situation presents itself, get Teddy Bridgewater as much exposure during the preseason as possible so other teams can see what he is. And yeah, I definitely think there's a scenario where the Jets can recoup a draft pick, maybe a fourth round, maybe even a third round draft pick for Teddy Bridgewater at some point. And who knows, maybe if there's a team desperate enough, they could even get a second-round draft pick for Teddy Bridgewater if a team really feels that he's the missing link between them making the Super Bowl run and not. So I think the Jets need to be patient here. I think they will be patient here because the other thing to remember, they had to give up a second-round draft pick next year to trade up for Sam Darnold this year. So I'm not saying you're going to get a second-round pick back for Teddy Bridgewater, but maybe at least you get like a fourth-round pick back. So that lessens the blow you're losing with that second-round pick a little bit.
I think that's very feasible for the Jets to get some sort of or some sort of draft pick for Teddy Bridgewater because we all know what Teddy Bridgewater is capable of. He's just been saddled with injuries for the last couple years, and that's kind of taken its toll on his production and his availability for the Vikings. So the Vikings, obviously, went with Case Keenum, who now left, and they got Kirk Cousins in the fold. Minnesota is kind of a team that's a win-now team because they got so much talent on that roster. They need to go with a more sure thing in Kirk Cousins. But quite honestly, I think Teddy Bridgewater still has a lot left in the tank. He just needs to stay healthy.
Well, they're right. Minnesota is the team that's there that I'm talking about. Bridgewater got hurt 2 years ago. They had a team in preseason that they felt was ready to win the Super Bowl or at least make a run at the Super Bowl, and then Bridgewater injury. And then they went out and they gave up a lot to the Eagles to get Sam Bradford. I think they gave up like a first and a third round. I mean, they gave up a lot to the Eagles. I think that might be a little unrealistic, but ironically, Bridgewater has been involved in this exact scenario on the other side the last time he was the quarterback who went down with the devastating injury.
Yep. I think, honestly, though, they're not going to get what they traded for Sam Bradford.
No, I don't think they will either, but it's just an example of if you can find a team desperate enough, maybe you can get a little bit more than maybe the market dictates.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
And then I've been asking this question to almost every guest because it fascinates me, the debate between the second and third pick in this past year's draft and the Giants taking Saquon Barkley and then Sam Darnold into the Jets with the third pick. My belief in football is always if you have a chance to draft a franchise quarterback, you take it. Even if you have a guy like an Eli Manning who still, I believe, has gas left in the tank for another 2 years or so, maybe 3. But to get a guy at the level of Sam Darnold's talent, at least what it stacks up to be on paper, and early showings obviously have been positive but limited. My GMing hat on here, I'd flip the picks, honestly, between the Jets and Giants there, and I know Samir disagrees with me, and I know most Giants fans do, but I'd love to hear your opinion on this, just because, again, I think in the short term, the Giants are set for maybe in the next year or two making a serious run, and then who knows this year if that defense can live up to the previous hype they had prior to last year, even though they lost a few pieces. But to me, if they don't win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years, which I think is Eli's window, and I might be being generous by a year, I think Saquon goes on to be a good running back, but the Giants lose their shot at just continuing this the winning success that they've had the last however many years. Granted, the last couple years haven't been great, but ultimately being a team that won the Super Bowl twice in the last decade, then turning back into a team that was kind of what they were before Manning, kind of middle of the road where they can't get high enough to get another good quarterback, and just not really being a playoff team either. So I mean, again, love to hear your thoughts on that. Just because I to this day I'm gonna a long time from now, I'm going to hold that the Giants should have taken Darnold.
I agree. I'm on the record from the moment that the regular season ended that the Giants should have taken A, a quarterback, and B, Sam Darnold. And as we know, they had the opportunity to do both. Darnold was my favorite quarterback of the 4 first-rounders who were available. I'm not throwing Lamar Jackson into that mix because he wasn't on that level. So if the Giants... my thought the whole time was that the Giants should pick a quarterback, even if it's not Darnold. Whether it was Rosen, probably Josh Rosen would have been the next guy in line if Darnold went number 1 to Cleveland. And then, of course, we're watching draft night unfold, and they pick Baker Mayfield. So not only is there a quarterback available for the Giants like we knew there would be, but it was Sam Darnold, and they passed on him. I said it before the draft they should have picked him, and I still say they should have picked him. Look, I'm with you. The Giants, when was the last time they picked this high in the draft? 1981. When was the last time they even had a top 5 pick in the draft? 2004 with Eli, or 2003 with Eli. That rarely happens with the Giants. They're not the Cleveland Browns. They're not the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're not one of these franchises that is used to picking in the top 5 year after year. So I actually thought everything lined up perfectly for them to take a quarterback. They got into the top 5. They got into the top 2, as it turned out. They have a quarterback who I agree has 1, maybe 2 good years left. I'm not pushing him out the door just yet, but he's not 30 years old. He's not in the prime of his career. And there were a plethora of options, including one guy who a lot of people thought very highly of coming out of Southern Cal on the board when it was their turn to pick. So I thought it broke perfectly for them to take a quarterback, but in hindsight, that was never their intent. Gettleman was in love with Saquon Barkley. He is in a more of a win-now kind of mode, so he didn't want to sacrifice putting his number 1 draft pick on the bench for 2 years to sit behind Eli Manning. He wants to get something out of Barkley right away, and that's the way he went. But I felt before the draft, I felt during the draft, and I still feel that the Giants should have picked Sam Darnold.
Well, my counter-argument, Tim already knows my counter-argument. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. I want you to hear this, Pat. I feel like the NFL is moving more towards a league where you can kind of pick up a quarterback, later on in the season or at the beginning of the season, kind of try to work around what you already have. You have your running backs, you got your wide receivers, you got a good offensive line, and then you got, I guess, good defense and a good all-around team to go around a quarterback. And you just need to get a guy like Nick Foles, who was able to take the Eagles to the Super Bowl and win it, or Case Keenum, who this year, the last year with the Vikings, was able to bring them to the NFC Championship game, and so on and so forth. You see these quarterbacks kind of step into already made situations, and I kind of feel like Eli Manning has that skill set already, where if he has a good team around him, all he needs to do is utilize his weapons to the best of his ability and really try to make the Giants go for it. And then when it's finally time for Eli to hang up his cleats, the Giants can kind of go out there and get a quarterback that has the ability to work with whatever they have, which the Giants are honestly, they're building a good team around a quarterback. So I think that's why Saquon Barkley was the right fit, because they needed a running back. They haven't had an elite running back since the days of Tiki Barber. You can say Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw were good running backs, but they were not elite. They were able to work around the prime Eli Manning and an amazing roster.
Well, Jacobs and Bradshaw were good enough to win 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, so they were doing something right. I just think back to, they had Phil Simms, and he won the Super Bowl, and then he was on the team and got injured when they won the 2nd Super Bowl. And then Phil Simms retired, and Jeff Hostetler moved on, and I remember close to a decade of Kent Graham and Dave Brown and Danny Cannell and some really brutal offensive performances for the Giants because they couldn't find that quarterback. Then you brought in Kerry Collins. He revitalized his career. You got a couple of very good seasons out of him, maybe 3 very good seasons, one in which he went to the Super Bowl. And then you get Eli Manning, and for the most part, the Giants, up until the last 4 or 5 years, when other things around Eli Manning crumbled, for the most part, you've had consistent play at that position now for a decade with Eli Manning. I, in my opinion, think you're understating the role of the franchise quarterback in the NFL. I think those were 2 very unique situations last year, Nick Foles and Case Keenum. And if you look at it, both of their teams cast them aside after that season was over. Case Keenum was let to walk away to sign Kirk Cousins, and of course Nick Foles is now the backup quarterback when Carson Wentz comes back.
Well, you always look to upgrade when an upgrade's available. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is an upgrade to Case Keenum, so the Vikings had no problem letting Case Keenum walk for an upgrade. So who's to say that an opportunity wouldn't present itself when Eli Manning hangs it up? Maybe a quarterback pops out of nowhere that becomes available, or one of their inner-house options like a Davis Webb or Kyle Lauletta comes in and just thrives from day one.
Well, that's the unknown part of this, and one of the answers that nobody has is how highly did the Giants think of Davis Webb? And let's put aside his performance the other night against the Browns in the preseason opener. Coming off of last year, how much did the Giants' opinion of Davis Webb play into the fact that they didn't think they needed to pick a quarterback high? And nobody will ever know, but it'll be interesting to find that out.
Absolutely. I guess time will just tell with this situation. If the Giants get a Super Bowl in the next 2-3 years with Saquon Barkley as the running back, then it'll be forever justified from this Giants fan. But if it doesn't happen and Darnold just leads the Jets to a Super Bowl down the road and Barkley never wins with the Giants, then you and Tim win the argument.
Then we'll know.
Then we'll know. Pat, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It was great to talk to you again. We always have great talks when it comes to sports whenever we converse, and I hope we have more in the future.
Guys, anytime. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and good luck and continued success with the podcast.
Thank you so much, Pat. And, whenever we're around the city or something, we would like to get you lunch or something, or maybe coffee or a beer if you prefer,
I won't say no to any of that. Sounds good.
Yes. We'll let you know, and we'll go from there. We definitely got to pay it forward to you.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome, Pat. Thanks for joining us once again. So that was Pat O'Keefe, the sports director of News 12 The Bronx and Brooklyn. And I forgot to mention as well, he's done some work for ESPN Radio, and he had an interesting journey to get to where he was at News 12 The Bronx. He started out in Montana following graduating from college and moved out further to Alaska after a couple of years at Montana. So he traveled pretty well before returning to his roots in New York.
Yeah, no, and again, Samir, you're killing it with these guests, and I got to step my game up and get some of my own, but I do have some offers. We'll see if those materialize.
Hey, you got that WFAN internship.
I did, but that's the thing is this is a networking game, as we've said in the past, with these the guests coming on, and it's always great to find guys who are willing to come back and talk to you about stuff about what obviously your internship history with News 12, but also just lending their time, giving their thoughts. I mean, it's always something we appreciate, and it's always something that not everybody does. I shouldn't say always something that not everybody does. It's not the norm per se. Especially in New York City, because it's such a competitive place to be. Not a lot of people have a lot of time, and to make time for a couple of guys that are just working their way up type of deal, like we're attempting to do here, is something that is something you remember. So yeah, no, I thank Pat for that, and I think Samir, just to kind of look back at his points, just the ones that jump out at me. I am with him. I think pretty much in everything in that Yankees segment. I am a little optimistic about Lance Lynn and Jay Happ. Obviously, small sample size with the Yankees, but as he said, and he beat me to the punch. The they're both and again, limited sample sizes have been pretty solid for the Yankees. I think, as he said, Happ has given up, I think, Lynn has given up one earned run in the 3 or 4 appearances he's made now. Happ is given up 1 and 3 in his 2 starts with the Yankees. So that's at least, if they can be stopgaps until Severino gets whatever funk he has out of his system, or maybe he doesn't. Obviously, that's another issue. But CeCe going down, cause for a little concern. Sounds like it's not going to be too severe, but how many more players need to jump on the DL? I know the Red Sox have dealt with it, and they've found ways to win, and a lot of it is schedule-related, built up that hype train, but they're also just a supremely talented team. The Yankees, though, get to take advantage, as he said. Weak second-half schedule, we've touched on it as well. And really, I know losses to the Red Sox and Mets are going to jump to the forefront of everything because what the Yankees' relationship with those 2 teams is. I'm not panicking right now. There's still time. Aaron Judge will be back. Gary Sanchez will be back. Hopefully, rejuvenated Gary Sanchez, and of course, CeCe will return as well. It's just you got to keep an eye on a guy who's that age. Getting injuries at this time is not ideal, obviously, but maybe it's a little bit of a breather that works to his advantage. Basketball, I love what you guys both said about Melo being that second unit if he's open to it. That's I think the biggest.
I think he will be, especially with Chris Paul being there. He'll keep him in line.
And I think he, looking for that ring, he has the opportunity on that team. They were 1 game away from beating the Warriors and then going to face.
Hey, if Chris Paul never got hurt, they could have been your championship.
Strong case that they could have made it and very possibly won. So I don't think it would have been a 4-game sweep, but I think it would have been a good series, and they would have been favored. Obviously, I mean,
honestly, the Warriors shouldn't have even swept the Celtics. Cavaliers, because
we all know JR, and the infamous. LeBron gave everything he got. I sympathize for that man. Yeah.
Now he got out of there. I'm happy for him. I don't blame him for leaving Cleveland. That's another.
Well, yes. Well, Isaiah Thomas doesn't either, apparently. I don't know if you saw that. Cleveland. He had to apologize for what he said about Cleveland just the other day. But, no, and then, Knicks, Nets. I mean, I think you're looking for a little more star power between the 2, but that doesn't mean there won't be.
I think they'll get one player. The Knicks and Nets, so they'll get one player piece. I mean, I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket saying Kyrie and Jimmy Butler are going to join Brooklyn. That would be great. I welcome that, but I can't go out there and with full confidence and say, it's definitely going to happen.
Well, I think it's like we talked about in the previous, I think last episodes too, is if the Nets get off to a fast start, that kind of endears yourself to say, hey, this team has some pieces. Yeah, there might not be all the same pieces next year because we're coming in possibly, but that I think makes an impression.
Yeah, I mean, there's also Kawhi Leonard, who's probably going to be available. I just don't see him staying in Toronto. I mean, maybe he pulls off a Paul George. Maybe he loves the 6. Maybe Drake smooches him up a little bit, and, maybe he stays. But I just can't see him staying in Toronto. If anything, he goes out to one of the LA teams or he comes to Brooklyn.
Yeah, and then as far as NFL goes, I think as far as the quarterback moves with the Jets, I'm in step with them there. I think it's possible if a team really wants to overpay now, and the teams that come to the forefront, and again, it's unlikely, but maybe Denver, if Case Keenum just flops again the next 3 games, in the preseason. Again, that would be really drastic. Much more injury related, I think, in the preseason would create an opportunity for the Jets to trade one of those QBs. And like he said, very likely it would be Bridgewater because he's younger, much, much younger.
He was a McCown will be there to kind of mentor Darnold, in my opinion.
McCown, if he's getting dealt, is being dealt as a backup. He's not being dealt, and unless there's a team that is super desperate and can't pay what the Jets want for Bridgewater, and just says, screw it, we'll just get somebody, because McCown has proven to be a stopgap guy, but he's not a guy who's going to go into the playoffs and win you games.
He's pushing 40 years old.
Right.
I think
he's a good backup, and I think a spot starter, probably passable. I think he did all right with the Jets last year, all things considered. But
that team won 6 games.
Yeah, and I think again, that's a type of mentor you do like having on your roster. But again, Bridgewater and the potential he brings not only as an asset, but in case Darnold were to hit a wall, either physically with an injury or even just mentally. I mean, if you make the switch to Darnold, that's a permanent move. You're not taking him out for performance reasons, unless he is the worst quarterback you've ever seen, and I don't see that as being the case. When he's in, which again, a guy like Jason Lockenfor has already said, long time, fair amount of time now, insider for the NFL, well respected. He believes that they're moving to Darnold for Week 1 as the starter, where that wasn't initially going to be the case. we'll see. Giants, I mean, as far as backup QB goes, I'd like to see what Kyle Lauletta has more. I mean, he got a chance in that game after we left. And I think the reviews were just, not bad. I mean, I'd have to look his numbers up at the moment. I don't have them right in front of me. But at the end of the day, I'd like to see a little bit more for him as far as reps go, just to see, what he brings. I mean, yeah, it's not fair to throw Davis Webb away after one preseason game, but it was bad. I mean, it was.
We witnessed it live.
It was bad.
That's why I was okay with leaving at halftime. I'm like, I'm not going to be seeing much from the Giants. Let's try to make it to the diner. We couldn't even do that.
No, so, the train schedule.
We tried Mickey D's.
And we couldn't get there.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people.
So I was a hungry Samir going home.
No,
man.
I
had to settle with the PB&J.
Yeah, I came home. I had some leftovers. Thankfully, I was lucky. But no, I mean, the Giants. I mean, again, moot point is if Eli does what he's done his whole career and stay healthy. I mean, you can never say 100% sure, but Eli's about as close as you can get because the only game he's missed is because his quarterback was an idiot. Yeah, yeah, and again, I just think from what Pat said there, it makes sense. Again, I don't think Davis Webb is the guy. I just don't. That's not just from that one performance. Just in terms of reading the things he were said about him last year, it doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to be the guy in waiting. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I would probably be a little more optimistic about Kyle Lauletta, who came from a tiny school but lit it up. So those guys do have a track record of success in the last decade or two, and even longer than that. But you can point to guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Flacco prior to 2012. Prior to winning a Super Bowl, Joe Flacco. Those are guys who were small school. Carson Wentz, all guys that were small school guys. So you never know. I mean, maybe Kyle Lauletta isn't one of those guys, but maybe he's a passable guy down the road. And then, I mean, I'm sticking to my guns on the Darnold Barkley argument. I understand what the Giants are doing. I get it. I do. They're making their window. They're shooting their shot. I mean, that's what they're doing. I'm still very much a believer in a franchise quarterback is the fastest way to a Super Bowl. Yes, like you have said, you can have a guy who's not necessarily a great quarterback at QB and win a Super Bowl, but you need to have everything else needs to be phenomenal. I mean, that's how the Philadelphia Eagles won last year. Every piece of that team was clicking, and their coaching was excellent. The Vikings, I would argue, top 3 most well-rounded roster in the league. Maybe not top 3 roster, just because, again, there's some question marks as to can Dalvin Cook come back healthy. I don't want to get too far into the Vikings right now, but just in general, they're up there. I mean, even if they're not top 3, they're top 5 or 6 in my mind. So I think there were some circumstances there that helped, and then I don't know. I mean, beyond that, we'll see. I mean, if the Giants' offense can get to where they're supposed to be, which is an elite offense this year, and there's a lot of belief. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to believe they can. They have all the pieces in place. The only question mark is, of course, offensive line, namely on that right side with Eric Flowers starting at the right tackle position right now.
They've upgraded, though.
But they have. He's older. Will Hernandez is a rookie, so he'll have some growing to do, but he's a guy who projects as a
He's a hog molly, man.
Yeah,
he's
that's
tough.
What Gettleman wants, and we'll see. I mean, Dave Gettleman's got a reputation as being a guy who is extremely strong-headed, and he's come out and before the draft he was making statements saying, "Hey, we want hog mollies. We want." I mean, he didn't outright say we want Saquon Barkley not to tip his hand during the draft and whatnot, but at the end of the day, he's going to do what he wants to do, and it's going to be very hard to persuade him otherwise. Is what his reputation at least has been. So, at the end of all that. I mean, I think it's going to be fun. I think in all 3 of those sports we touched on. The Yankees obviously are the lone playoff team right now in New York, and that's not going to change this year.
The Mets will win out.
And we're coming up on, I think...
I should have asked Francesca that yesterday. I should have been asked Francesca, will the Mets win out?
Twitter.
And then it'd be, will the Mets win out?
Will they win?
I got to do the perfect voice. It'll be like, well, the Mets went out. The answer is a resounding no. That's what they said about Joe Flacco being an elite quarterback.
Yeah.
Man, we gotta get Francesca on this show.
That would be something. That would be an otherworldly experience.
Oh yeah, he'd be like, Andy Pettis, the starting pitcher. Nah, I don't know, man. I gotta get that good impersonation back before I go serious into that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're gonna have to figure that out.
So Tim, man. You looking forward to this wedding coming up?
Oh yeah, It's exciting news. We have a good buddy of ours from college, Nick Hyden's getting married in a couple days, so we're going to be bringing our shooting the breeze from a wedding. We're not doing an episode there. No, that would be possible.
We won't.
Given our plans, but at the end of the day, no, very exciting. I got Nick's getting married, our good buddy, and a couple weeks after that, I got another wedding, a good college buddy.
So congratulations to the future Mr. Nicholas Kyden and Mrs. Margaret Kyden.
Yes, very very excited for Nick and Margaret.
I'm very excited as well. I'm looking forward to just being back with the college buddies, and doing college things in suits.
Absolutely, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, my man.
Yep, and then as far again, and I think we had another good one today.
Yeah.
I think again we want to thank Pat for coming on.
Thanks for News 12, the Bronx and Brooklyn sports director Pat O'Keefe for joining our show. Very gracious of him, and he gave this college kid 2 years ago an internship, and he trusted me to come in to work on time and help out with the daily news stuff, and he trusted me to be the guy that got stand-ups on the camera and carry around tripods and stuff. He was like, I trust this guy, from SUNY Oswego. I'll give this guy an internship. I'll pass up on other maybe Syracuse or Fordham guys, and I'll give this Oswego kid from Monroe, New York. He used to have to publicly transfer to News 12 the Bronx. I used to have to take public transportation. It was a pain to get there, but I'd say it was a very rewarding experience.
Well said. But I think one thing looking forward ahead is again I've been touching on it now that we've gone over a couple preseason games. Well, we've looked through one preseason game for the New York teams each. We'll have, I think, some football news to talk about. It's probably best to do a preview after week 3 of the preseason. That's when what injuries have been, the major injuries have happened at that point because starters play in that third game and then all the backups play game 4. But, I think we'll look forward to having an opportunity to do that. And, after that, we'll get into some playoff baseball not too long after that, and then basketball, hockey will start up not too long after that.
And the Devils and Taylor Hall will be able to start their trek onto the Stanley Cup.
Another playoff year out of the New Jersey Devils.
Hell yeah, Taylor Hall will get another Hart Trophy, and the Devils are going to win it all. They're going to be the best team of all time.
Watch out for those Buffalo Sabres. I'm representing the shirt right now, going from worst to first, baby.
Yeah, you guys might go 41 and 41. We'll go 82.
That would be a substantial improvement.
We're going to go 82 and 0.
Buffalo fans. I mean, you'll have some overtime losses in there, but I think Sabres fans would see that as a positive step. That's about what the expectations, point-wise at least, is somewhere around 500. But you never know. I say that made some moves in the last couple of weeks that are encouraging. But that's for another day. That's
164 points.
Mid to late September. We're talking hockey, and of course I will always find a reason to get a couple mentions in there when there's some moves and stuff. And of course I'm going back to my hockey job in September, so I'm excited for that. But before that we got some good stuff heading into the middle of August and the dog days of summer.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of Tim and I, this is Samir Kumar, and we're signing off on Shooting the Breeze. Thanks again, Pat O'Keefe, for joining us today, and let us know your thoughts, and let us know where we can improve, let us know what we've done well, and, we look forward to making this a big thing.